Okay, great. While they're getting that all set up, I just want to introduce Michael Fry. He is the Director of Subsea Operations and Training for Northwest Technical Solutions. So I'll let him describe exactly what that is a little bit more.
Everybody hear me all right? Good morning, my name is Michael Fry. I'm the Director of Subsea Operations and Training for Northwest Technical Solutions. We're a new service provider in the Houston area. We have offices worldwide. We also do training for the oil and gas industry, heavily focused on the drilling contractor and the maintenance crews offshore. So what I'd like to go through is closing the knowledge gap. How do we take this upcoming great crew change that's getting ready to happen and minimize the effect that's going to happen on the industry? Before we get started, I'd like to just talk about my first day offshore. My background prior to coming into the oil and gas industry, I spent 10 years in the U.S. Navy working on nuclear submarines with torpedoes, cruise missiles, and the weapons delivery systems. The challenge for me was once I got out of the Navy, or once I started in the Navy, the military is heavily training based. So you start off, I was 17, mom and dad had a sign for me to actually join the military. I went through my basic training, and the next thing you know, I was on a nuclear submarine working with high-spec equipment. The beauty of the military model is the stronger your team was, the stronger you were as a supervisor and as a leader. So we spent a lot of time on training and mentoring every day. Every day there were different scenarios, every day there was different manuals that we were reading. Every day they wanted us to be subject matter experts on our own systems. The reason for that was, at a moment's notice, when that alarm went off or that call for action went off, you didn't have time to look to one another to try to figure out what was going to take place. You had to know what to do at that moment's notice. 10 years goes by, get an opportunity to go offshore and start working in a subsea training program. My very first day, I arrive on the rig, go through my indoctrination training, and I get brought out to the subsea office to meet my senior subsea for the first time. We sit down, we kind of go over the normal chit chat, welcome aboard, welcome to the company, tell me a little bit about yourself. And then he starts to tell me how he works as a supervisor. And it was a real eye-opening experience for me. It starts off like this. I want to let you know that I'm not a trainer, so don't expect to get trained. I have a huge temper and a short fuse, so don't make me mad. What I want you to do is go out and meet the other guys, and we'll catch up later. And I thought to myself, what in the world did I just get myself into? Coming from a world where you spend a lot of time training and mentoring and building up your staff, my very first day was, I'm not a teacher, don't make me mad, go out and meet the other guys and we'll catch up later. So for me, training has always been a passion of mine. I had an opportunity, I was a former subsea manager of Vantage Drilling. When Northwest Technical Solutions came to me and said, we're looking to build a training department. We have no staff, we have no curricula. We want you to take it from scratch and develop an industry-first type of training. For me, it was very easy to make the switch because I knew, in my opinion, I knew what the industry needed. I saw how a program worked from the military. I knew how to deal with people and how to train and mentor. So it was a very easy transition for me and something I was very excited about. So that being said, what's the biggest challenge facing the industry today? Well, that biggest challenge is the transfer of that critical knowledge from these senior superintendents who are getting ready to be a part of that great crew change down to the trainees that are coming in today. But for us, more importantly, how do we accelerate the development of that junior person and get him up to speed? Because as we all know, that I call it promotion through attrition is taking place every day. Senior guys are quitting, junior guys are being promoted, and the next thing you know, you have people in positions who shouldn't be there, also known as the Peter principle. We promoted someone almost into incompetency. For us, we start off looking at the normal career development path for any employee, onshore or offshore. Normally, you start off as a trainee, work your way up to assistant supervisor, senior supervisor, and now for the offshore guys with the kind of the boom in the technical field support groups, you also have the opportunity to be a superintendent. So when we start off looking at this normal career path and identifying what position really needs what type of training, it was very easy to start the development. This is an example of a standard training matrix for a subsea department. Subsea obviously being my background, one of the most heavily scrutinized groups in the oil and gas industry today due to the post-Macondo findings and what do we know and what do we not know. I highlight the assistant subsea in red because that's normally where these guys go to training. They get their OEM BOP course, they get their OEM controls course, and if they got to do well control, they go to well control, but after that it stops. As they get promoted, they can turn back around and say, no, I already have my OEM certificate. I don't need to go back to training because I've already done it. So we're not developing people as they grow that career transcript, as I like to call it. This is what it normally looks like. You get hired, you do your OJT training. If you get to go to a physical training course, you're actually kind of lucky. But a lot of companies who don't have quality training, that's where it stops. After you've gone through your basic first run in your first position, you're done from a continual growth kind of standpoint. So for us, is there a more effective way to train today's employee? We feel that there is, and also to develop them. Again, if you look at the standard career path, what we've done is we've introduced what we call the 5 levels of competency. Do you train a person that's been in a position 20 minutes the same way you train a person that's been in a position for 20 years? Well, that answer is no. There's different requirements based on the different levels of knowledge and based on the different levels of experience. Unfortunately, as an industry, we tend to group everybody into the same pool. If you're a senior subsea, or you're a chief mechanic, or you're a senior, drilling engineer, you meet the same pool as everybody else that you work with. And unfortunately, that just doesn't work. If you look at the 5 levels of competency, what ends up happening is we put together what we call the development life cycle. So you get hired right off the bat, or you get promoted, you have new competencies. So if I'm an assistant, I've been moved up to a supervisor, I have new requirements for that position. What does this person do from 6 to 6? If we look at an assistant subsea, a chief mechanic, a roustabout, a roughneck, any position, what does that guy really do on tower? Does he do the same thing as the guy that's a senior subsea? Well, that answer is no. And again, any position. What we promote is as you get promoted, you get new competencies. You have new requirements for your job. You need to learn new skills. With those skills come training. We as an industry, say, hey, look, this person's incompetent. When the person turns around and says, well, then send me to training. Well, we're not going to send you to training, just go out and figure out how to do your job. So we have this vicious cycle that's gone on for so many years. And it started 16 years ago for me when I got the first call to say, I'm not a trainer, don't expect to be taught, go figure it out yourself. But as you move forward, you get your new training, you get your new OJTs, new position, new requirements. With the practical experiences you get, you gain that level of knowledge in your competency level. You started off as a novice, as a beginner, and now you're moving up to more of the expert at that level that you're at. Once you get promoted, you need to start all over again. When I was working on the rig as a senior subsea, I had the opportunity to be moved into the office of the technical field support. The challenge was I was looked at as an SME for the rig that I worked on. When I came to the office, I now had to support all the rigs in the entire company. My level of competency for these other OEMs was not to the same level, so I went back to go to training to try to learn these other systems because I was aware that I didn't have what I needed to have to support the other rigs. So again, as you go through this development life cycle, this career transcript, everybody, even myself, we constantly have to grow, we constantly have to develop. I like to kind of call this either your professional development or your personal development. Always trying to challenge yourself to get better and to grow. And when you look at it from the employee standpoint, how do we close that knowledge gap? If we're not constantly infusing new learning opportunities to the people who we deal with, we're always going to have that separation of knowledge from the experienced to the inexperienced. One of the questions that we like to ask at Northwest Technical is, are we training people for subject mastery or just general knowledge? Subject mastery being full command or understanding of a subject. A lot of the courses that are available today in the industry are what I like to call overview courses. You come in, you learn about everything under the sun, and then in 3 to 5 days they push you back offshore and say, here you have a certificate, you should know what you need to know because I gave you some training. Subject mastery is really getting into what is it that I do from 6 to 6? What do I do on the job? When you look at training courses in a way, from a development standpoint, and you change the way the model is, instead of building a course and hoping somebody comes to it, looking at what the requirements are for the people that you're actually delivering it to. Who is your target audience? So for us, we look at the foundation of learning. First and foremost is knowledge. Again, focusing on how do we close that knowledge gap. In the industry today, there's a big push with IADC and for the KSAs. Let's focus heavily on KSAs. KSAs are very important, but unfortunately, without the first foundation of knowledge, the skills and abilities really don't have the same value that they had before. I like to use the example of an electrician. If you don't know Ohm's law and the basic principles and theories, you can be a great splicer and a great solderer. You just aren't going to make a good electrician. Same thing the other way around. You might be great with the hands-on and the skills part of it, but if you don't know the theory behind the work that you're actually doing, you'll never be able to troubleshoot and build any circuit. So for me, 1 + 2 = 3. We focus very heavily on the competencies, but we're not getting back to the foundation of knowledge and really teaching people what they need to know to be able to do their jobs. So for us, when we look at that foundation, knowledge development, you have to start with the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I know that sounds kind of trivial, but it really, at the end of the day for us, are we hiring the right people? Do we have the right people starting off in those positions? Does he have the aptitude to one day be a senior supervisor? Sometimes we see that people get thrusted into a position because they were friends with somebody else, and the next thing you know, it's kind of like the sports analogy I like to use is that backup quarterback who's never going to be a starter, but he's been in the league for 20 years. He's never going to make that starting role because he never had the foundation to really be that person. Next, when it comes to knowledge, we look at the core knowledge, the theories, the principles, and being able to identify what you're actually looking at. Do we teach the people how to read schematics, what it is that goes into the building of these systems? When we look at the next part, the practical knowledge, system operations, troubleshooting, it's keeping it basic hydraulics. You understand schematics, you understand the theories and principles. Now let's work on how an actual system works and troubleshoot the basic system. Because what that leads into is an equipment-specific training. When I was with Transocean, we did what was called the Subsea 100 program. It was a program where we went out and took 100 people from outside the industry and brought them into Subsea and tried to teach them a fast track, a hyper fast track program to try to get them to be able to go offshore. I was one of the main developers of this program, and in standing here today, I can honestly say that we went about it wrong. What we did is we took people who we knew could be future guys, but we went straight to equipment specific. We said, well, we have to hyper speed these guys, so let's skip some of the other basics. Let's just go right straight to equipment specific and we'll throw them offshore. What we found is that we were missing some of the core and practical areas. When they got offshore, they came back and said, it would have been really great if you would have taught us this, this, and this. So when you go through a development phase of an individual, you really have to look at, do they fall in and have we taught them all the different areas? I think it's great for a forum like this where it's heavily based on simulation and training, but if we're not training them at the foundation, we can give them all the fancy computers and all the fancy gadgets that they need. They're just not going to have the aptitude to pick it up if we don't have the right people and we don't train them properly. For us with curriculum development, again, closing that knowledge gap, we look at 3 main areas. We looked at the theoretical, what's in the books. There's a lot of great information that's in the books. However, a lot of the books are not written for the guys offshore. And again, the business that we do with Northwest Technical is heavily based on the drill crews and the maintenance crews. The OEM manuals are built for the shops. If you really read through them, you'll see that it's just not made for that guy who's working on the rig. Then we look at the practical. Again, I say it a lot, what is going on from 6 to 6? If we teach the guys what are going on from 6 to 6, then they're going to be able to build into that future person working offshore. And for me, how do we take that historical knowledge that's getting ready to be lost in that great crew change and teach the future? We do it through curriculum development. If you sit down and have a core foundation of what it is you want to teach, and then you get your SMEs and some of these guys who have been there and done that and seen everything, what else would you like to teach? What else do you think these guys should know? What else with this piece of equipment have you ever seen issues with?